What's up, everybody, and welcome on into Monday. This is the NBA Strategy Show. It is also the Bradley Beal screwed my lineup last night, but hey, Syracuse won, so who cares? Hour that we will, I don't know, probably not speak on much beyond that comment right there. Nevertheless, I'm Adam Kaufman, happy to be joined, as always, on a Monday by Greg Ehrenberg. How are you, buddy?
Good. Got some good banter going in the chat right now. We had good slate last night, although LaMelo Ball getting hurt. I have so much money invested in him winning Rookie of the Year, which I still feel decently about. Like, I still think he should win, but it was the lock of all locks until yesterday. Now it's kind of a toss-up in the air. So that was pretty devastating to me. But, I mean, injury is just a pretty big deal around the association right now.
Yeah, so our guy Alex, of course, tweeting out, I think it was late last night, said something to the effect of LaMelo Ball is going to be the first guy to win Rookie of the Year and then Comeback Player of the Year the next year.
Is Comeback Player of the Year even that's not even a thing in the NBA, is it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Is it?
I think so. Well, now I got to Google it. NBA Comeback Player of the Year. Yeah, it's a thing.
Oh, all right. Who won last year?
I'm going to tell you. Hang on.
I'm going to disagree with whoever
very
it was.
Important stuff. Oh, well, so now they renamed it the NBA's Most Improved Player Award, but
that's a different award.
It's the same thing.
No, Most Improved Player is the player who improved the most. Comeback Player is the guy.
If you go to Wikipedia, which is never wrong, it says the National Basketball Association Comeback Player of the Year was later renamed the NBA Most Improved Player Award. So either we're going to have to passionately argue about this for 55 minutes, or we can just accept that in a way we're both right.
Yeah, I'm just. Chat, because I know I'm right here. Just tell Kaufman that he's an idiot, because he's wrong. Like, Comeback Player of the Year, Most Improved. These are totally separate things.
I agree that, like, fundamentally they mean different things. If you were to say to me me looking at that, are these the same award? I would probably say no. But when the NBA turned one into the other, we have to accept it as the same thing.
All right.
I'm fine with the chat weighing in on this.
All right. I'm totally okay with it too, because you are wrong.
All right, let's hear from you, chat, on this very important issue as we prepare you for an 8-game slate in the association. We do only have so much time to dink around here on this show because we will have college basketball talk coming up at 11 Eastern. So we're here with you for a total of 55 minutes, whether we finish going through these games or not, but we will because that's our job. So tonight, you have got, again, the 8 games, Greg, and just some of the top players available. Never mind what kind of spot you think they're in. We'll get to that. But Karl-Anthony Towns is actually one of the guys at the top of the heap. Domantas Sabonis, Chris Middleton, Jason Tatum, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You got Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown, Zach LaVine, guys like that. Who stands out to you most?
All right. So, I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns, it's by a pretty wide margin. I have him projected for about 8 more fantasy points than anybody else on the slate. With Giannis Antetokounmpo out, there just aren't that many viable pay-up options on today's slate. So Karl-Anthony Towns, to me, definitely going to be a priority play. And yeah, there's just nobody else that I have as a pay-up option that's anywhere close to him right now.
Let's see. Just looking at the chat as people laugh at us. Kaufman's such a good dude. Beal killed my lineup too. That's from Tony. It felt important to read. Adam is definitely wrong on this, says someone whose name I cannot pronounce. I apologize. That's
Jariah the Gallant.
Okay. Yep, let's go with that. Most improved, Pascal Siakam last year. Let's say Adam, you're right. Greg is the idiot in the room, says Robert. Adam wrong, says Larry. Yeah, sorry, Adam, says Jordan. That's not even our Jordan. He hasn't weighed in, I don't think. Greg, well done. Yeah, I'm just going to assume that I absolutely nailed it. LaVine will have 50 fantasy points tonight, says Aesthetic Bunny. Do you agree with that before we move on?
No, not even close. They're playing against the Utah Jazz. I think we could debate whether he's going to score
40 by Alex.
I was going to say we could debate if he's going to score 40, 50. I mean, obviously anything's possible. That's a very low likely outcome, though. That's probably something that I expect to happen, 15% of the time.
Sure. All right, let's go into our first game here, and we'll tell you all the fun stuff going forward as well. Again, get involved in the chat. Anything you want to talk about, obviously keeping it mostly basketball centric would be helpful since we do have a time limit. And any questions that you have as you prepare those dummy lineups, remember, I wouldn't lock anything in at this hour of the day. Lock can change over the course of the next 9 hours or whatever it is until lock. But Sacramento and Cleveland, let's begin with the Kings because Kings are important. Tyrese Halliburton is in a solid spot. Harrison Barnes, you can make the argument that he's in a pretty good spot. Hassan Whiteside, if you wanted to pay down as well. De'Aaron Fox, Rashawn Holmes, those guys that normally we would be talking about right at the top of the Kings. Buddy Hield, kind of sort of in that equation as well. I don't really like them as much. I think it's much more of a Halliburton Barnes kind of discussion, but tell me what you think.
All right. So injury situation for the Kings. We still have Marvin Bagley out. He's going to miss most of the regular season because of a fractured hand. Now we've seen Hassan Whiteside. He's back and he's playing not like a mass amount of minutes, but he's playing enough minutes to where it's taking a little bit away from Rashawn Holmes and they're splitting the center minutes. So over the last 3 games, we've seen Whiteside play 20 minutes, 16 minutes, 15 minutes, and then Holmes plays the rest of the center minutes. Now, why that's significant is because before Whiteside came back, Rashawn Holmes was playing all the center minutes he could handle. So we're seeing games where Rashawn Holmes is playing, 38, 39 minutes, but now that we're seeing some of those minutes go to Hassan Whiteside, now we're more often seeing Rashawn Holmes play like 32 to 34 minutes. His price is still expensive, so that makes him less appealing of a play. So De'Aaron Fox, to me, is somebody I want to get to on FanDuel, mostly just because of the positionality on FanDuel. De'Aaron Fox at 8,900, he is the most expensive point guard. And then LaMelo Ball would have been somebody at 7,900 that I think we would have liked to roster. But now with him no longer in play, we only have 2 point guards that are expensive on FanDuel, and that's Trae Young going up against the Clippers and De'Aaron Fox against the Cavs. So as far as pay-up options go on FanDuel, especially where we generally have a little bit more salary to spend, the restrictions aren't quite as tight. I think it's not all that difficult to get up to De'Aaron Fox. He's going to be a priority play for me there. On DraftKings, Tyrese Halliburton, I assume the minutes restriction is going to start to be lifted on him. He struggled a little bit from a fantasy perspective in the second half of the season, but he also was coming back from injury. He had a minutes restriction, and now he's played over 30 minutes in 2 of the last 3 games. He's starting for the Kings now. So going forward, I expect that he's going to start to produce better now that the minutes restriction's off. He's starting to get healthier as he gets a few more games under his belt coming back from, I think it was a hamstring injury. I think we're going to start to see Halliburton's production get closer to what it was earlier in the season. So 5,500 for him on DraftKings makes him somebody that I want to get to. But overall, Kings not a super high priority team for me. It's just some exposure to Fox on FanDuel and exposure to Tyrese Halliburton on DraftKings.
And Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, with his projections available to you with the Awesemo Plus subscription. He has Halliburton projected for about 6x value, so a pretty good night ahead, obviously, if you want to pay down, make some room for him. As far as the Cleveland side of the ball, and as we know, and this has long been the case, no Andre Drummond, not even with the team, no Kevin Love. So it's just this filter down of who is going to perform here with this Cavs team. Colin Sexton, always in that conversation. Around him, I don't know how you feel about guys like Jared Allen, Darius Garland, Larry Nance. I don't feel like anybody's in an especially good spot.
Yeah, so I've been really high on Larry Nance lately. He's had a bunch of good games for me over the last couple of weeks. He's now had good fantasy games in yesterday was fairly mediocre, but beyond that, he had games with 44 fantasy points against the Celtics, 34 fantasy points against the Heat. I still think it's a little bit too cheap. However, there is a little bit of a difference in scenario here because Taurean Prince, who's been out the last couple of games, he's now questionable to play. So if he comes back, one of the things that's been really appealing to me about Larry Nance is that he's playing a massive amount of minutes. And I don't think we're going to see quite the same amount of minutes from Nance if Taurean Prince comes back, because over the last 4 games, Nance has played 38 minutes, 37, 34, and 32. And he's probably going to cede some of those minutes to Taurean Prince if he's able to play. So the injury to Prince, I don't think Prince is going to be a viable option himself, except if he plays, he's going to take Nance out of play for me. And if he's out, then Nance is going to be somebody who I'm going to go right back to. As for the guards here, Colin Sexton is definitely somebody I like in this matchup against the Kings on both sides. This is a pace-up matchup for the Cavs. The Kings are also towards the bottom of the league in defense efficiency. So there haven't been too many better fantasy matchups this year than going up against Sacramento. So I want to get exposure to Cleveland, and Colin Sexton looks like the best way to do that as of now.
All right, before we move on to our next game, I want to tell you about our sponsor, No House Advantage, taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across, of course, the NBA, but also MLB, NFL, when that's in season, PGA, which, as we know, is going on right now, and all for cash prizes at that. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field, makes it easier for you to win real cash as compared with your traditional daily fantasy sites. Now, the best part, you can join for free today, folks. Join for free today. Download the No House Advantage app and use the promo code Awesemo to receive a match deposit bonus up to $20. Eligible for all users, by the way. Beat your friends, not the house, and win big with player props today. So again, thanks to our friends, the folks at No House Advantage, and get involved in the chat. Hit the like button as well. Right around 50. Smash that like with a few hundred people watching us here early on a Monday, and hit the subscribe button also, so you can be alerted when any of the Awesemo programming goes live on YouTube, which is several times per day, especially today. There's a ton going on today that we'll tell you about a little bit later on in this hour. Let's move to the next one here, 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight. That is the Thunder and the Timberwolves. For OKC first, mentioned SGA earlier. Really good spot, projected for right around fantasy points, 45 fantasy points by Alex. Al Horford, who may or may not be on the trade block in a matter of days, is also in a good spot and kind of a pay down. He's a couple grand cheaper than SGA. After that, you know, it's the role players who tend to stand out when one of those two guys that I just mentioned is ruled out with an injury or something like that, which any given night, I won't rule that out for the Thunder. So, you know, be on the lookout, obviously, with this team. But how do you feel about SGA and Horford?
Did we talk about SGA earlier? I don't even remember. I mean, SGA is injured. He's questionable to play today. So I don't know how I feel about him. It depends if he plays or not. The Thunder have been super cautious with anybody who's been dealing with any sort of injury this year. I mean, we've seen Darius Bazley hasn't played in the second half of the year. George Hill's been out for a really long time. Al Horford seems to rest like 3 out of every 5 games at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I assume that SGA, there's a good chance he sits, but I don't know. I just need an update here, because if SGA plays, then yeah, he's a viable option going up against the Timberwolves. But if he's out, it creates so much value on OKC. Pokashevsky would be somebody who we could expect to get more usage. Lou Dort, who's not like an especially high usage guy, except he would have to play so many minutes in a game that if SGA isn't able to play. Ty Jerome's been a good fantasy producer as of late. I assume that he would either start or at the very least play a whole bunch of minutes. If SGA isn't able to play for the season, Ty Jerome playing 27 minutes per game, 21 fantasy points in those minutes. So if we're going to give Ty Jerome start in somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 minutes, then we'll be looking at him approaching 30 fantasy points in a plus matchup against the Timberwolves. So I don't know what to make of this team until we get an update on SGA, because obviously whether he plays or not is going to have pretty big implications on the slate.
If he is out, and I know obviously, you know, Alex is projecting him in, but early in the day when a guy's questionable, you know, you got to take a stance. We've talked about that before. So obviously his stance right now is that he's in. That could impact things naturally, like you said. But if he is ruled out, and then you're creating all this value, and then especially when you're looking at the other side of this game right now in Minnesota, where, you know, virtually everyone who is going to play is projected for 5x value. How close are we getting to this becoming, you know, not a full-on game stack or anything, but where you want to roster a bunch of players?
Not really that close, because a lot of these guys are somewhat expensive. I mean, like relatively. So like I look at Ty Jerome is 4,800 on DraftKings. He'd be a very good value play without SGA. But I mean, this is a guy also who in situations earlier in the year, if SGA was out, we would have expected him to be the flat min at 3,000. The reason being is there have been so much rest and injuries from the Thunder this year. There's been so many guys in and out of the lineup that we're kind of accustomed to these guys playing extended minutes at this point. So at any given time, we've kind of always seen the Thunder with a tight rotation. So there's nobody who's just a ridiculously cheap price. So there's going to be guys that I want to get to, like Pokashevsky and like Ty Jerome if SGA is out. But I'm not going to roster like 4 of these guys in each of my lineups when they're all priced around 5,000.
All right. Well, what about as far as, you know, Minnesota? Again, Karl Anthony Towns, you talked about him loving the spot that he's in, and he is projected for about 5.5x value, north of 50 fantasy points by Alex. That's on DraftKings. Anthony Edwards, Ricky Rubio, Jaden McDaniels, they're all 5x projected. You know, Juancho Hernan Gomez, you got Josh Okogie as well. All these guys, I mean, it's really just, you know, Naz Reid, who is not necessarily in as good a spot as the rest. Who do you like here outside of obviously Towns?
Yeah, so Towns, like I said, my favorite pay-up option on the slate. Nobody else is super appealing. If I had to go to somebody else, Anthony Edwards, but DraftKings specific play, not really FanDuel. FanDuel is at 7,700. That is about a fair price point for him. On DraftKings, where he's about $500 cheaper, I think the reason that we want to get to him is just based on number one, a favorable matchup against OKC, especially if SGA is out. But then also there's so much usage going to Anthony Edwards right now. And he has not been efficient at all this year. But when somebody's going to play 38 minutes per game with a usage rate of somewhere between 30 and 40%, it doesn't really matter that he might only make 6 of the 24 shots he takes, because that's so many. It's just so much volume. And if we look at the last handful of games for Edwards, usage 31%, 41%, 30%, 35, 32, 32, 33. It's so many shots he's taking on the court. He doesn't care if he makes or misses them. He's going to keep shooting them, and nobody's stopping him. I think this is going to be a totally different situation when Malik Beasley comes back, when D'Angelo Russell comes back. Then the shots are going to be distributed a little bit more evenly. But as it stands now, all of the shots are going to Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. So Anthony Edwards at a slightly reduced price on DraftKings compared to FanDuel is worth being in the player pool.
If you are not available to watch your favorite Awesemo shows on YouTube, that's okay. You know, we're a little hurt, but we'll get over it, especially since you can go back, by the way, and rewatch anytime. The shows, they live forever. But if you'd prefer to listen elsewhere, don't forget about the Awesemo Podcast Network. It is all the YouTube shows. They are available through the Awesemo Podcast Network. Podcast for every sport, available on every major platform as well. Head on over to awesemo.com/podcast. Check out the very latest. Leave a 5-star rating and review of these podcasts with your Twitter handle or email address, and you will be eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus, which is a nice little savings in your pocket there, and Platinum as well. One winner will be awarded every Friday. Reviews will be eligible to win for up to 1 year. So best of luck. Be kind, even to Greg. I know some of you in the chat, you can be nasty to Greg. We don't like that. Be nice to Greg.
Oh, no. We love it.
At least leave positive reviews then. We've got that going for us here. And keep hitting that like button north of 300 watching along here on the YouTube feed live with us this morning, or even if you're watching on tape delay a little bit later on and there's, I don't know, an Inception thing going on with that comment, but smash the like then. The likes, they never go stale. Next one here, Charlotte, San Antonio. Let's start with the Hornets here. Kind of similar actually to Minnesota in terms of all the value that's all over the place and options. You don't necessarily have as strong a pay up option here as obviously you do Cat. You know, your best case scenario, Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, in terms of guys, you know, that are projected for in the 30s fantasy point wise. But you could go down to Devontae Graham, Miles Bridges. You know, these guys really solid spots. 5.5, 6x value by Alex projected. How do you feel about this team?
Yeah, so I mean, the key here is that LaMelo Ball is out, expect to miss the rest of the season with a fractured wrist. So if you look at the on-off court numbers for the team this year, there's surprisingly not one guy that benefits a ton in terms of usage. The guys in the starting lineup, the player who gets the biggest usage bump is Terry Rozier at 1.1%, and that's not something all that significant. But what does matter is that we could expect bigger minutes to go to Terry Rozier, Devontae Graham, and Malik Monk. So all three of those guys are players that are worth being in the player pool, with the highest priority being Devontae Graham. So Devontae Graham, who was dealing with the knee injury earlier in the year, it was left patella something or another. I don't know. I've said it a bunch of times and I forget what it is now, but he was dealing, more importantly, knee injury, missed a bunch of time.
You're not a doctor. It's okay. We forgive you.
No, I mean, I am sometimes. I Google stuff on WebMD every once in a while, and it's like, hey, LeBron James is probably going to miss 4 to 6 weeks.
So at least you're not Googling about yourself.
No. I mean, sometimes, but not medical stuff. Devontae Graham, now we're starting to see the minutes restriction. I assume it's going to have to come off just because there's no LaMelo Ball. The minutes haven't been massive for Devontae Graham. We've seen him play around 22 minutes over the last week. But as long as Devontae Graham starts in place of LaMelo Ball tonight, he becomes one of the best plays on the slate because he's much cheaper than we normally would see him earlier in the year when he was a starter. Don't forget, I mean, the season opened with LaMelo Ball coming off the bench and Devontae Graham was the starter. Then eventually they ended up flip-flopping those roles. LaMelo took off and then the Hornets became good. I think they're really going to struggle without LaMelo, and part of it is because Devontae Graham has to play all those LaMelo Ball minutes, which for now is going to be good for us for DFS, but it's going to be bad for the Hornets in terms of them winning games. So let's see what the starting lineup is. I assume it's going to be Devontae Graham. If it isn't Devontae Graham, it's going to be Malik Monk. But whichever of them starts becomes a pretty high priority value option.
This game right here is one of the worst on the slate in terms of total. So, that in mind, obviously be weary. I wouldn't necessarily go crazy stacking this game. I think people probably know that, especially on this San Antonio side where I don't know. I mean, building my own lineups every night, and I'm more of a, you obviously are a multi-entry guy, as a lot of people listening are. I'm someone who likes to build one lineup, stick with it, and just throw it wherever I'm going to throw it. But with that strategy in mind, it feels like forever since I've played anyone who is on the Spurs, whether it's DeRozan, Murray, Johnson, any of these guys. And tonight sort of feels like another one of those nights that you're going to kind of fade this team. What do you think?
Well, I play these guys all the time, especially because they've had so many players out recently. But now they finally have everybody in there. DeMar DeRozan was away from the team for a little bit due to the death of his father. He's active now. DeJounte Murray rested last game. He is back. Derek White, he was out for a little while. He's back. Patty Mills, who missed a game for rest the other day, he's back. So this is as full as we've seen the Spurs rotation in a little bit. So DeMar DeRozan, not somebody I want to get to. DeJounte Murray, not somebody I want to get to. Derek White, not somebody I want to get to. The only player that really stands out here is Kelden Johnson at a 5,400 price tag, specifically to FanDuel. Kelden Johnson's minutes have been more consistent as of late. Over the last 4 games, he's played 32, 31, 39, and 34 minutes. While some of that has to do with the Spurs being shorthanded, I also think there was a bunch of odd circumstances that led to Kelden Johnson not playing his full minutes a few weeks ago. Number one, the Spurs were in a bunch of games that were blowouts. Number two, he was coming back from COVID and he had a minutes restriction. And I think just those things combined together meant that we didn't see big minutes from Kelden Johnson. But now that none of that's a concern, I think we're going to regularly start to see 30 plus minutes for Kelden Johnson. So at a still slightly depressed FanDuel price, he's a good small forward option.
Do us a solid again, subscribe on the Awesemo YouTube page and keep up to date with all the shows, DFS offerings, giveaways, so much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button, get alerts when the shows go live. So we are right around halfway through going over this 8-game slate here. Next one, near and dear to my heart, the Celtics and the Grizzlies. As a Celtics fan, I'd love to tell you they figured it all out with yesterday's win over the Magic. But again, I am a Celtics fan, so I know better. This team, let's begin with Boston here, and a lot of enticing options. I don't know how drawn to them you are, though. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart is in a really solid spot in terms of his price per dollar or points per dollar, I should say. Daniel Tice, Robert Williams is in that equation as well. So it's, top heavy as one might expect with Boston and who's going to get the usage. But how do you feel about this C's team in this matchup?
Yeah, so I think that's something we need to keep an eye on is the status of Tristan Thompson. Robert Williams, who I think is pretty clearly the best big man on the Celtics. You and I have talked about this before, and something everybody who's mentioned a lot recently is that Robert Williams, everybody would like to see him in the fantasy community get more playing time because he's so good when he's on the court. But not only could he potentially not be getting the extended minutes, he might even be seeing less minutes than normal today because Tristan Thompson is questionable to play coming back from the COVID protocols. If he is in, he's going to be in the rotation. That could only take away minutes from Robert Williams. So that's something that I think is going to just totally marginalize Robert Williams and make him somebody we can't even consider as a GPP flyer. As other options, Marcus Smart, his price is still down a little bit on FanDuel and DraftKings, and I don't really think there's any kind of minutes restriction we need to be worried about at this point. Marcus Smart, who after missing a bunch of time, came back and played fairly limited minutes, but now it looks like that's less of an issue. The last 3 games, 29 minutes, 34, 33. He also started the last 3 games. So I think we could safely assume going forward that Marcus Smart's going to play his regular 30 plus minutes. And considering that he's somebody we normally see priced over 6,000 on both FanDuel and DraftKings, and it's not the salary that he's currently at, it's reasonable to assume he's a little bit too cheap. So he's somebody I think makes for a good value option. Jason Tatum, to me, just about fairly priced. I don't really think there's a need to go heavy targeting him. Jaylen Brown, I prefer him to Jason Tatum on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel at 7,800, that's also a pretty appealing price point for a small forward option. I don't think that the price on Jaylen Brown is way off or anything like that, but it's a slate where we have a decent amount of value and there's such a lack of guys to pay up for that's really what makes Jaylen Brown somebody that I want to get to is just because I don't have other places to spend my salary.
It's not on this game, but I do want to shout it out because it's super chat from Dowens 89 says last man in, Holmes or Allen FanDuel GPP. What do you think?
It is very early to be building your lineup and making a for sure call here, but I prefer Jared Allen to Rashawn Holmes.
Going back to the Celtics, a lot of Time Lord love, especially from our producer Jordan, who says with the wrench, the Lord of time, which he is. Just play Tatum and Brown and move on, says Swaggy P. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that there are other guys that I prefer to pay up for. They're definitely going to be in my player pool, and I said I prefer Jaylen Brown, but I mean, we'll see what happens with the slate. I don't think that playing them together is ideal for the slate.
I'm guessing the answer is no, and rightfully so. But in general, it sort of goes down the whole narrative street thing, which I know you don't like. But is there ever any sort of hot streak momentum mentality to you, like Jaylen Brown going for 30 plus and 10 3-pointers a career day yesterday, and just that sort of mentality, like, oh, now I can't miss all that. Is he someone that, I know you like him better than Tatum, and that's fine, I understand that, but are you more inclined to roster him coming off a huge game the very next day, or do you just not care about that?
I don't really care about it. Here are the things that I care about, things that are quantifiable. So, meaning if there's something that's happened that would lead me to think, like, why did Jaylen Brown shoot more yesterday? Like, let's say there's a player who's injured or a player who's out, right? That's a reason to think, like, okay, there's reason to think that Jaylen Brown is going to shoot more now because of that. Actually, funny enough, I'm probably more apt to play players coming off bad games than good games, just because of the way the pricing mechanism works. If somebody plays well, the price goes up. If somebody plays poorly, the price goes down. And generally over time, we're going to expect the player's production to balance out. Like, basketball is not some game with crazy variance swings. It's not something like baseball where somebody all of a sudden is scoring like 15 fantasy points. Then they have some sort of swing mechanic issue and they struggle to hit the ball for a couple of weeks. Generally, if somebody averages around 40 fantasy points per game in basketball, they're going to score right around 40 fantasy points more often than not. And then when somebody's out of the lineup and they're either getting extra usage or extra minutes, we could expect them to score a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, basketball's, at least relative to other DFS sports, it has a lot less variance and it's a lot more consistent. So when the pricing changes on a player, that's really where I'm more apt to either be higher or lower on them. So for that reason, if somebody plays really well and the price goes way up, I'm probably more likely to be off them than on them. Oh, that's not the case for today because Jaylen Brown's price hasn't really changed.
Marv Perry says, you guys are the best, man, with some thumbs up emojis. No, Marv, you're the best. Better than everybody else here. I'm just kidding. We love you all. Smash the like button, really. Thank you very much. Next side, anyway, and that's Memphis. Other side of that game, and you got Ja Morant, Kyle Anderson. They're in better spots, I would say, than Jonas Valanciunas. There's, obviously some of the pay down options, not paying down from Anderson, but Dylan Brooks, he's a little bit more expensive, actually. Brandon Clark, Grayson Allen, all generally the same price point. There's no real huge fluctuation on this team in general, but who stands out to you? Is Morant going to go crazy tonight?
Probably not. I have a moderate amount of interest in Ja Morant and Jonas Valanciunas just because we have the situation, like I said before, we have a lot of value on this slate. We have a lack of guys to pay up for. So Morant and Valanciunas are both going to be in my player pool, but low priority plays. Valanciunas, his minutes are all over the map. He's a really good points per minute fantasy producer. If we capture a day where he plays 32 minutes or 34 minutes, then there's a chance we get a pretty significant amount of upside for him, except there's an issue of the Grizzlies play a really deep rotation and Valanciunas gets into foul trouble a lot. So there's a bunch of games where Valanciunas just only ends up playing 24 or 25 minutes. So not somebody we could trust in cash games. He's probably like a 5% guy in GPPs for me. And then Ja Morant also probably somebody I'm going to roster in 5 to 10% of lineups. And then I just no interest in me in the rest of the Grizzlies rotation because everybody else just plays like 24 to 26 minutes. And the lack of extended playing time really limits the ceilings on those guys.
Also going back to Boston here, just, perusing the chat a little bit. If we don't see Kemba Walker second leg of a back-to-back, as has been the pattern this year, and, Marcus Smart certainly becomes a more appealing play. Are there other guys that are going to stand out to you more, even, whether it is a Tatum or Brown, just in terms of some of those pay-up options?
No, I mean, I assume that Kemba's out today, but it doesn't open up any value for me. It's just extra usage going to Tatum, Brown, and Smart. But sure. There's no, I'm not rostering Peyton Pritchard. I'm not rostering Nesmith on this slate. There's just so much other value available to us with Giannis out, who we'll talk about in a second, with no LaMelo Ball, and that opens up somebody like Devontae Graham, maybe Malik Monk. So just guys who are much stronger value plays. Like, we've seen a pretty good sample of Kemba Walker being out, and it hasn't led to big games for anybody of like Pritchard, Nesmith, or Teague in a very long time.
Stay up to date on the latest NBA DFS news, not only here with shows like this and so many shows coming up over the course of the day, but with, of course, the Awesemo NBA Twitter account. It is at Awesemo NBA. Easy enough to remember. You also have our guy News God, who's hanging out with us in the chat as well. He'll be delivering the latest on injuries and news and starting lineups and minutes limits and all the stuff that comes out that is relevant to you to build those lineups daily before lock. As soon as it is out there, he will have it and he will send it out and he'll put it in the Awesemo Premium Slack channel as well. But be sure to follow at Awesemo NBA on Twitter and check out News God's Twitter feed, which is news, N-E-W-Z, God _ DFS. Be sure to check out Adam's deep dive article, which is free this season. Ship My Money. It is a must read if you are playing NBA DFS tonight or any other night for that matter. So make sure you do. Let us move along and take a look here at Utah and Chicago. Now, this Jazz team, I don't want any part of. I know Donovan Mitchell's projected for 40 plus points. Rudy Gobert is a guy to consider from time to time. Mike Conley as well. I just don't see any sort of appeal for Utah here in this one.
Rudy Gobert is questionable to play. I think that is important to bring up.
Sure.
I think he's more likely to play than sit the game, though, because he's questionable with a hip injury. But he was questionable to play a couple of days ago with the same hip injury, and he played then. So a lot of times we see teams not update the injury report. That might not be the case here. Maybe it's just still lingering, bothering issue, and they're still considering sitting him. But there's a lot of times we'll see players listed as questionable, and they'll remain listed as questionable with the injury, kind of something like we saw all at the beginning of the season with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and team just won't update their injury report unless something actually changes with the team. So my gut feeling is that's the case with Rudy Gobert, but I could be wrong on that. But if he is out, Derek Favors becomes a really good value play. If Gobert is in, I don't really think there's anything to see from this Utah Jazz team. Matchup against the Bulls is definitely favorable, but the price tags are fairly significant for Rudy Gobert, for Donovan Mitchell. There's other guys that I would rather pay up for, even the limited options we do have to pay up for. Like, I think the Celtics guys are slightly more favorable than Utah. Like, I'd rather get to Jaylen Brown than Donovan Mitchell. And then if I'm paying up for a center, if Rudy Gobert's in, then Karl Anthony Towns, to me, is a much preferred pay up option at center to Rudy Gobert. So Utah, very low priority team.
Hit the like button, closing in on 100, north of 400. North is not a word. North of 400 people watching along here on YouTube. Other side of this game, Chicago. And that is, we were talking about, someone asked about Zach LaVine earlier. You're not expecting a huge night out of him. Some of the pay down options, Satoransky, Markkanen, certainly you could justify playing either of them, probably not both. What stands out to you here for the Bulls against the Jazz?
Nothing. I don't really make a habit of rostering players going up against the Utah Jazz. They are really difficult to score real life points on. They're really difficult to score fantasy points on. It's one of the best teams in the league at limiting fantasy production, and overall one of the best defense in the league. And then on top of that, we've got the Bulls, who are a team where we usually get a bunch of production out of Zach LaVine, but not somebody I want to pay up for on this slate. And then beyond that, like, Satoransky's been favorable recently. I liked him a bunch for yesterday's slate, but not for me against Utah. Also, tail into a back-to-back for Chicago, that could be a little bit of an issue with fatigue. So Bulls are a team that I'm perfectly fine with leaving out of my player pool.
All right, let's keep going then and get your questions in, as we always tell you. Let's see here. Toronto, Houston. We'll start with the Raptors. We got a few games left to go over before we get to Odd Shopper and go over some of this Aaron Gordon stuff that's been breaking this morning as well. I want to spend some time on that with you. But here for the Raptors, you've got I don't know. I don't think Larry or Siakam is necessarily in the best spot. Fred VanVleet, you could justify, certainly. OG Anunoby is probably in the best spot in terms of at least points per dollar. What's your view of the Raptors?
All right. So for the Raptors, I think Pascal Siakam has a favorable price tag on DraftKings, but there's nobody here that really stands out all that much. And the reason being is that this is another team where we saw a bunch of guys miss games due to COVID. So we have Kyle Lowry and Norman Powell, both more expensive than they normally see them. And now we kind of everybody healthy, also tail into a back-to-back for Toronto. Pascal Siakam at 7,500 on DK. That's a little cheaper than we normally see him. And it is a favorable matchup against Houston, but still not really a high priority play for me, especially because he's priced right in that same range as the Milwaukee guys, who we're going to talk about next game. I mean, with Giannis likely not playing, it's pretty hard to stay away from guys like Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton. So Pascal Siakam, that's going to make it hard for me to want to roster him. OG Anunoby is a little bit cheaper than we normally see him. And on FanDuel, where it's a little bit harder to roster guys at that price point, I think that Anunoby is a better FanDuel play than DraftKings, especially because of the defensive stats. Somebody who's definitely capable of putting up multiple defensive stats in the game. If you look at his last couple of games, 4 steals and a block against Utah, 3 steals and a block yesterday against Cleveland. When we get 3 points for defensive stats instead of 2 points on FanDuel, that makes somebody like OG Anunoby more favorable.
For Houston, Christian Wood is at the top of the pile here, and so great to have him back and playing. I'm sure the Rockets feel the same way after all their struggles this year, especially with injuries or guys just wanting out. Wood is projected for 40-plus points, 5x value. John Wall, solid spot for him. Obviously, you don't have Victor Oladipo, so that's going to help some of the periphery players, not to mention those two. Maybe a Daniel House, for instance. Not so much Porter and Tate, it looks like, in terms of their projections. What do you think?
Yeah, so I don't have Victor Oladipo or John Wall playing as of now. Okay. Tail end of a back-to-back, John Wall and Oladipo, both of them been resting in these situations. So since both of them played yesterday, for now, I assume both of them are out unless I hear otherwise. We've seen other games where John Wall has not been listed on the injury report early in the day, and then just later on, they end up adding him to the injury report because it's tail end of a back-to-back. Because there have been times where we've said like, oh, maybe John Wall will play in a back-to-back, and then just ends up not being the case. So for now, I'm assuming that John Wall and Victor Oladipo are both out. And assuming that is the case, Kevin Porter Jr., he played really well earlier last week when neither of them were in. I expect that to be more of the same. So Kevin Porter Jr., somebody I want to get to. And then Christian Wood too, who, by the way, also maybe a little bit of a chance that he rests because he is coming back from an ankle injury. And the team had said that he was going to be on a minutes restriction for the foreseeable future. He played 36 minutes yesterday, right after they said he was going to be on a minutes restriction. So I don't know, maybe
30, it wasn't 40.
It wasn't 48 either. They didn't play him the entire game, but yeah. I do wonder if him playing on the tail end of a back-to-back after playing 36 minutes, right after they said he's going to be restricted, if that opens him up to the possibility of rest. But for now, I have him in. I have John Wall and Victor Oladipo out. And as long as that's the case, Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood, both really strong plays. Jayshawn Tate, somebody else I want to get exposure to. Sterling Brown, if he starts, he would be a good value play. I just kind of need to see what the starting lineup is here, who actually ends up resting, because this looks like a team that's going to be really good to target.
Folks, you probably see the Awesemo avatar all over the DFS leaderboard, and rightfully so. It is for a good reason. If you rock our avatar, what are the words this morning? If you rock the avatar on your DFS profile, you win a free month of Awesemo Plus when you place within the top 3 in any GPP of 5,000 plus entries. Head on over to awesemo.com/announcement/avatar, or simply Google search, and this is easy, Awesemo avatar, easy to say even, for instructions on how to download that image. Couple games to go here. In about 15 minutes, we will be here with you, and then we'll turn things over for some college basketball talk. Get you ready for more madness coming up. It's been a great tournament so far, by the way. So for Indiana and Milwaukee, we start with the Pacers. We'll hold on your guy Giannis for a second. Domantas Sabonis projected for about 45 points or so, 5x value by Alex. Taking a look at the, again, points per dollar. Malcolm Brogdon, Karis LeVert, Miles Turner, these guys not in as good a spot. So it really just kind of is the case some nights, Sabonis or bust. How do you feel about the Pacers?
So Karis LeVert remains too cheap on FanDuel, at least. DraftKings, he's much more expensive, but FanDuel, he's 5,600 now. We've seen his price very, very slowly climb up since coming back from his kidney issue. Since coming back, he was at 3,900, then 41, then 44. Now he's up to 5,600. Still a little bit too cheap. I think Karis LeVert should be a player who's priced over 6,000. So on FanDuel, he's somebody that still a little bit too cheap I want to get to. Domantas Sabonis as a points per dollar play, I don't have projected especially well tonight. However, there is so much value on this slate that I think if we're going to need multiple guys to pay up for, I'm just going to fall into Sabonis lineups because I don't really have any other choice for players to pay up for. So Sabonis, I don't love the price point on him, especially because even though we've seen some good games from him as of late, I still have to think going forward now that Karis LeVert's in the mix, it's going to take away usage. It's going to take away shot attempts. It's going to take away touches and playmaking duties from Domantas Sabonis. So he's still produced well with LeVert on the court in games, except we have seen it come down a little bit in the last two, 35 and 36 fantasy points for Sabonis. And I'm a little concerned with him going forward. So I'm I'm going to have him in my player pool, but I'm probably going to be underweight to the field on Sabonis.
El Negro Loco, our guy News God, thank you for the birthday wishes. It's not my birthday, as you know, but you all know that. Someone had written, where was it? I don't know. I scrolled past it in the chat, but somebody had written that we look like brothers separated long ago. It's probably why we, argue so much.
Yeah, remember, one of the worst days of my life. There was a video you were doing somewhere, and somebody tagged me on and had said they thought it was me. Like, and it was that's like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. So yeah, it's not the first time somebody's thought that.
One of the worst days of my life feels slightly exaggerated, I hope. But, Eric says, is that stubble on Greg's face or just a shadow? Yeah, you look like you were a little lazy this morning.
Well, I mean, I don't shave every day. Like what? What do I do? I'm wearing pajamas. What I'm trying to impress the YouTube chat when I talk about fantasy basketball.
That's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Dress to impress. Look at this polo. Look at this collared shirt.
Yeah, I'm not trying to impress anybody. This is a shirt I got at a beach many years ago, and I'm wearing pajama bottoms.
Picked it up at the flea market this morning. All right, let's go to Milwaukee here, and there's just value all over the place. This is, with no Giannis projected here in this situation. Obviously, Chris Middleton is projected for 6x value. Same thing for Drew Holiday, 8x for Bobby Porter, 6 for, or close to it, Dante DiVincenzo, Brook Lopez, 5 for Pat Connaughton if you want to obviously pay down for him. You got, a handful of those guys projected for 30 plus fantasy points. These are all DraftKings numbers, some overlap obviously with FanDuel as well. But, it's clear that you don't have Giannis. You don't have one of the best players in the NBA available for your team in a given night. It's going to be, impactful for everybody else. But who are your favorite plays here, and how many of them would you like to wedge into your lineup?
Yeah, in cash games, play Chris Middleton, play Drew Holiday, play Bobby Portis. All three of them are must-haves in cash games. Chris Middleton, 32% usage rate with Giannis off the court this year, scoring just under 50 fantasy points per 36 minutes. Drew Holiday, 27.5% usage rate with Giannis off the court this year, scoring 45 fantasy points per 36 minutes. Then Bobby Portis, I expect he's going to start. He's a good points per minute fantasy producer. So Bobby Portis playing somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes. He is somebody that we want to roster a ton for cheap. So those are the three priority plays for me from Milwaukee. Dante DiVincenzo, also somebody to get exposure to. He sees a usage increase. He scores 35 fantasy points per 36 minutes when Giannis is off the court. The priorities are going to be Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, and Bobby Portis. I think you need to have at least one of them in all of your lineups today, probably preferably two. I saw earlier somebody in the chat said that we should not play more than two in the same lineup. I don't agree with that. I think you could play as many as 4 of these Bucks guys. I'd probably want to run it back with maybe like Karis LeVert on FanDuel or maybe Sabonis in that sort of situation. But in general, I think $3 is something I don't have any problem with for this slate.
All right. And some people calling you a liar saying there's no way you're wearing pants.
No, that's not true. I wear pajamas and the since a little hot, I've got the sleeves rolled up too, up to my knees.
Just for comfort too.
Yeah. I mean, what do I
sit on a cold chair?
Well, my chair's not cold. It's fluffy and pink.
Well, in that case, maybe he's not wearing pants, and take it right back. All right, last game that we've got for you, and then we'll work in some other stuff before we do get out of here in about 10 minutes. That is the Hawks and Clippers. That is, of course, the late game, the showdown contest tonight that is available to you, and we'll have special programming around that as well. But for the Hawks, does anybody jump out to you tonight? Because really, it's not that appealing to me.
No, not really. I'll have like a couple of Trae Young lineups, but nothing significant. He's not somebody I'm going to really be invested in. Tough matchup against the Clippers. And then something else here, DeAndre Hunter, who was expected to be out for like 2 months or something like that. Right after they gave a diagnosis that he was out for 6 to 8 weeks, he was listed as questionable 3 days later. So that's really bizarre. But yeah, he's listed as questionable on the injury report. If he comes back, that's going to marginalize Danilo Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, Bogdan Bogdanovic. We could also see them playing more smaller lineups. So that could mean less minutes for John Collins. It could mean Clint Capella plays a couple less minutes. So, I mean, there's a lot of implication if DeAndre Hunter's back. Also, because this is a 10 p.m. game, there's a good chance we're not going to find out until way after lock. So, yeah, I don't think anything individually stands out as a good play. If I had to roster one Hawks player, it would be Trae Young, but that's only because nobody else is even remotely viable for me.
All right. Other side of that game, the Clippers, you've got more appealing options. It's not just the obvious, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. You could make the, case that Zubac is maybe even more appealing if you're looking for value, obviously at the center spot, and 6x value projected. You got Nick Batum paying down to him $4,100 on DK might be a viable option for you. Who do you like?
So I don't really love anybody. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George also, just because this is a slate where there are not very many pay up options. I think that they become viable just because of that. But neither one of them, I don't think, are going to be guys I'm getting to at a massive amount of exposure. At center, Ivica Zubac is actually overall my favorite play on the Clippers, particularly on FanDuel. We do not expect Serge Ibaka, which, by the way, I don't understand why Ibaka has been listed as questionable for all these games, and we don't find out whether he's playing or not until after lock. Because I mean, today Ibaka, they just ruled him out ahead of time. So I mean, I assume they've known all along that Ibaka wasn't going to be playing in these games. Patrick Beverley, he remains out, so that's going to mean a little bit more ball handling duty for Paul George. But yeah, Zubac's on FanDuel where he is priced at, he's a little bit cheaper than he is on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel, somebody who I project for right around 30 fantasy points. He is one of my favorite center plays. He's a little bit popular, except still, I think the 20% ownership on Zubac is not enough considering what we've seen from him as a starter. Zubac in his starts this season, he's had some really big games as of late. Overall, as a starter, he is playing 28 minutes per game, scoring nearly 30 fantasy points in those starts. So I think that Zubac at center in a plus matchup against the Hawks is somebody that we should want to roster at center on FanDuel.
We've got from Andrew, Garland or Hield on DK?
Probably neither.
Well, if you had to pick one.
I mean, I don't know what kind of situation that is. The other thing too, I mean, he's got a full, let's see, quick math here. He's got a full 7.5 hours, or what time does slate start? So he's got 9 hours to build his lineups.
Yeah.
You got time. Don't make either of those guys priorities. Yeah. Don't make either of them a priority.
A couple of Tatum or questions. I've seen Tatum or DeRozan. I've seen Tatum or Levine. What do you think?
Tatum over DeRozan and Tatum over Levine. Levine going up against the Jazz, that's a no-go for me. And then DeRozan's had some big games lately, and also somebody who benefits massively with Marcus Aldridge off the court, but still, he's been priced all the way up to 8,500 for the season. Jason Tatum's still a much better fantasy producer than DeMar DeRozan. Also, slight usage bump going to Tatum because Kemba Walker's out. So, pretty clear Tatum over DeRozan for me.
Chris says, hey, Twins, should I roster Portis or Deontay?
Portis.
I think I need to grow a mustache back just for a little differentiation between the two of us. Eric says, and I already know the answer, but for those joining late, I'll ask the question. Is Towns the top spend on the slate on DK? What do you think?
I mean, yes. And there's not anybody well, also he's the most expensive player at 9,500. That's so much cheaper than we normally see from other top spends. But then we have De'Aaron Fox. I have Karl-Anthony Towns project for like 13 more fantasy points than Fox. Then there's Sabonis. I have him project for way more fantasy points than Sabonis. And then there isn't even another guy priced over 9,000. So it's like, there's just no comparison to anybody else.
All right, let's tell you about Odds Shopper here before we do run out of time. Of course, don't make a bet without shopping for the best odds first. We tell you that all the time, every single show. Betting lines, they can change by the minute, can vary greatly, of course, folks, depending on which book you are using. It's why it's important to use the Awesemo Odds Shopper to find the best line available on the game that you are betting on. Give you that edge when you need to beat the house. Head on over to oddshopper.awesemo.com where we compile the best bets available for every game, updated in real time. You can sign up for free today, track your bets, receive alerts when lines move. Of course, what you see on your screen right now, that is what it looks like, folks. And I'm going to go on over to Awesemo and the Odd Shopper page, obviously. Take a look at some player props. You got point spread, total, money line, all first quarter matchups that are available for you right now and the odds there. But let's go to player props. And points is generally what we're looking at here. Who's a good one for you? How about De'Aaron Fox over under 25.5?
Let's see. De'Aaron Fox over under 25.5. Yeah, that is a very fair number to me going up against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I do not like the over. I do not like the under. I think that is a perfectly priced prop right there.
So stay away from prop for you.
Yeah, that could not be more fair. That is on the nose.
Colin Sexton, 26.5.
points for Colin Sexton, 26 and a half. I actually have a slight lean towards the over there. The matchup against the Kings, very favorable. Kings played a fast pace. They have a really poor defense. So Colin Sexton, who, what's funny? Colin Sexton's kind of been like a slightly more efficient version of Anthony Edwards. If you look at the usage for Colin Sexton, the playing time, it's been really significant. Last handful of games, 39 minutes, 37 minutes. Yesterday, 35% usage rate, scored 36 points in that game. Scored 29 each of the 2 games prior to that. So, yeah, I mean, the usage and playing time has just been so high for Colin Sexton. He's also been, like I said, fairly efficient this year. So, for the year, plays 36 minutes per game, 29% usage rate. All of that just lends itself to a lot of points, and then also really consistently high points.
How about no LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, 20.5 points?
I don't think this greatly changes the scoring expectations for Terry Rozier. Like, he doesn't see any kind of real significant usage bump when LaMelo's off the court. Maybe sees a couple of extra minutes, but I mean, he's already been playing a bunch. So I tend to think that the extra minutes are actually going to go to guys like Devontae Graham and Malik Monk. So to me, it's just a fair prop. I don't think that we should significantly change our outlook on Rozier without LaMelo.
So there is, before we get out of here in the next couple of minutes, there's some news this morning coming from The Athletic that Aaron Gordon of the Magic has requested a trade. Now, it's not for us necessarily to dive into the, what other teams' offers are going to look like and all that good stuff. I can tell you, though, Keith Smith, who covers the Magic and many others for Yahoo, among other places, tweeted just a couple minutes ago, best I could put together from talking to folks around the NBA and the Magic asking prices for players. Nick Vucevic, multiple firsts and young players. Gordon, 2 firsts, a young player. Ross, a first and a young player. Fournier, a young player and or a first. The key is Orlando wanting good first. So I don't expect you to know everybody's war chest, obviously, but is there a fit in terms of a team that would be looking that you like for Aaron Gordon?
Aaron Gordon isn't that good. I mean, he's a solid player, but I wouldn't be giving up like multiple first round picks and like a young player for Aaron Gordon. Let's see, for the year, Aaron Gordon was actually shooting 40% from 3. But he's had a whole bunch of health issues. I don't buy into that 3-point shooting at all, especially because he was a 31% 3-point shooter last year. And then I was pulling up his stats. Did anybody else hear that, or was that just me? I was pulling up his stats. Okay, I was pulling up his stats, and then all of a sudden, just like ESPN started playing a bunch of music.
Oh, no, didn't hear that.
Oh, okay.
Just hear you. Don't worry.
All right. So something else that I'm looking at Aaron Gordon's numbers really quick that leads me to believe that it's not something that we should buy into his 3-point shooting. His free throw shooting has regressed from 67% to 62%. So when somebody's that poor of a free throw shooter, I don't expect that all of a sudden their 3-point shooting to increase at the same time too. Like, there should be some sort of, synchronicity between that. If you've improved your jump shot, then your free throw shooting and your 3-point shooting should improve. And so that's always a red flag to me. If one of those things, if 3-point shooting is a way outlier like that and does not match up with the free throw shooting, I don't know. If that's what the asking price is for Aaron Gordon, that just seems too steep to me.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that and certainly tend to agree with you. Coming up over the course of the day, by the way, you have got, in a matter of minutes, our guys, Ben, Matt, they'll be with you for the college basketball live before lock. That'll be available to you right here, so you don't want to miss out on that, obviously. The PGA DFS first look is at 2 o'clock Eastern time, followed at 3 by NHL Strategy Show, so like this show, but a different sport. At 4:30, you will have the tip-off. You're coming on back for that, aren't you?
Yeah, something like that.
All right. And so after that, normally at 4, it's 4:30 today, 5:30 NBA Deeper Dive, 6:30 NBA Live Before Lock, and at 9 NBA Late Slate Showdown, again, focusing just in that one game, the Clippers and Hawks. So, Spags, maybe it's EMAC with them. Those guys spending a full hour talking about that later on. Don't necessarily envy those two guys with that game, but nevertheless. So any major takeaway going into tonight as things stand right now that the people should know, and knowing full well that things are going to change over the next, like you said, 9 hours or so?
No, we have to get out of here. So just pay attention to the injury report.
Well, then let's go. Our thanks to Greg, to Jordan, to all of you for joining us. Hit the like on your way out the door. Leave a comment later on. We do go back just on occasion to check them out and read them. It's fun for us, especially when you're nice. We'll see you later. I'll catch you on Thursday.